Welcome to the Campbell Museums. A mundane object like a basket has many stories it can tell, and in this video I explored just a few of these stories. Think of this video as the abridged history behind baskets. This video is part of our What's in a Box series, where I pull a box from storage and see what we find inside. So check out our box number 5 playlist for more. Thanks for watching, and please consider supporting us by liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and becoming a member of the Campbell Museums. Mania is defined as mental illness, marked by periods of great excitement, euphoria, delusions, and overactivity. But it can also be an excessive enthusiasm or desire. Some might even say an obsession. Like Beatlemania, or tulip mania that crashed the Dutch economy in the 1600s. But have you heard about canastromania? Canastromania means basket fever and was coined by Smithsonian curator Otis Mason in 1904 to describe the basket collecting craze that had gripped white America. Let's explore. Historically, American Indian baskets were utilitarian objects to help with daily tasks like collecting water, storing food, trapping fish, and cradling young children. The patterns were geometric and not representational. Baskets were often decorated with feathers and shells. As American Indians out west came into increasing contact with non-native cultures during the 1800s, trade items like ceramic and glass beads were integrated into their baskets, replacing traditional shell beads. Tin was even repurposed by the Apache to make beads, but overall the basket shapes and patterns retained their traditional aesthetic. During the mid-1800s, the gold rush picked up steam and more Americans came to California, invading Mexican territory and further displacing California Indians from their land. Soon, California was part of the United States, and in his inaugural speech in 1851, California's first governor said that a war of extermination will continue to be waged between the races until the Indian race becomes extinct. These extermination efforts, along with outbreaks of disease, dramatically reduced the California Indian population. So much so that many Americans believed that the tribes were going extinct. Motivated by this threat of extinction, Americans did not fight to protect American Indian tribes from further genocide. No, instead, they sought to preserve the baskets, igniting a basket collecting craze. An 1891 article written for the Placer Herald remarks on the birth of the basket craze, calling it the latest fad among artistic people. There were a few factors that helped promote this fad. At this time, Western culture was becoming increasingly industrialized. In response, the arts and crafts movement took hold, promoting the purchase of artisan-crafted objects over mass-produced, machine-made furnishings. American Indian baskets fit perfectly into the arts and crafts ideology. Magazines and newspapers promoted the fad through articles about Indian basketry. Local exhibitions displayed basket collections and sometimes had the weavers themselves on display. Also taking place, the railroad industry was luring tourists to the western part of the United States by promoting interactions between white travelers and the, quote, exotic native populations. These ads often highlighted Indian-made baskets, blankets, and jewelry that could be bought as souvenirs. The extent of canastromania is well illustrated by the popularity of having an Indian room in your home. There was a trend with affluent and primarily white Americans around 1900 to have an Indian room, which was intended to showcase all the American Indian art and objects that they had collected, often during their travels out west. And these folks were serious about attaining their next conversation piece. An 1891 article described the method for how some collectors found their baskets. The article says, The successful basket fiend must have what is popularly known as cheek, must walk into the bedrooms and private apartments, insist upon trunks being opened and contents shown. And if you couldn't travel out west and burst into people's homes demanding to see their baskets, not to worry, there were basket dealers that would order hundreds of baskets and sell them in their galleries. But more on them later. Now that we've explored the demand side of the basket craze, let's explore the supply side. During the 1800s, American Indians were forcefully removed from their homes by the U.S. government. Removal from their land destroyed their ability to maintain their way of life and left them increasingly dependent upon government support and odd jobs to make a living. Men would often work as ranch hands or miners, and women often worked as house cleaners or doing laundry. Baskets were made for daily household duties or ceremonial use. They were not commercial items to be sold. But as the basket craze took off, many of the California Indian women saw the opportunity to make money for their families through weaving and selling baskets for tourists. That same 1891 article noted that the sellers generally believed the white Americans to be great fools for paying such high prices. It's noted that tourists would pay 5 times as much for an old, used basket than they would for a new one. So a basket, which was once used to sift flour, could be sold for large amounts of money. Soon, baskets were being made for the purpose of sale and could be purchased at regional tourist centers such as Lake Tahoe, Yosemite, and Death Valley, as well as along railroad lines in the Southwest. As the basket market developed and increasingly catered to white collectors, basket designs were changed to appeal to Western tastes. Changes included moving away from geometric patterns and creating more representational design elements, such as human figures or animal forms. Innovations in shape also began to appear. These changes were sometimes guided by the artisans themselves, but other times they were guided by the white dealers that helped sell the baskets. We will explore a few dealers later in the video. Some weavers, like the women from the Achumawi and Atsugewi tribes in Northern California, covered glass bottles, and those are the objects that we have in our box. Our woven bottles are made using a twining weaving technique. Bear grass is used for the light color and maidenhair fern for the dark color. According to the California Academy of Sciences, this pattern is a water snake design, and I couldn't find a name for the other one. Another change to the baskets resulted not from Western tastes, but from traditional materials no longer being available due to Western development of the land. By the 1940s, enough roads were widened, rivers dammed, and parking lots created, making scarce weaving materials that had once been cultivated in the wild for centuries. Now let's explore a few of the players who actively promoted and sold American Indian baskets during the basket craze. During the 1890s, Abe Cohn and his wife Amy Cohn lived in Carson City, Nevada, and both were heavily responsible for promoting American Indian basketry as an American art form. While some may debate the true nature of the relationship, the Cohns effectively controlled the life of a Washoe weaver, Datso La Lee, also known as Louisa Kaiser, who Abe met when she was working for him as a housemaid. Datso La Lee is considered one of the finest weavers of her time, and the Cohns acted as her business manager and press agents. The Cohns built a small house for her behind their home and took care of all her basic needs like food, clothing, and shelter in exchange for her baskets, which he then sold at his store, sometimes for hundreds of dollars, which is insane for the early 1900s. To be clear, it does not appear that she received compensation for her baskets beyond her housing and food. Abe was also known to direct Datso La Lee on what patterns and shapes she should weave to appeal to Western buyers, but he marketed her baskets as being traditional. She made around 300 baskets during her lifetime. At the opposite end of the exploitation spectrum was Grace Nicholson of Pasadena, California. Nicholson valued authenticity over commercial appeal and practiced a hands-off approach with the weavers she worked with. While Nicholson sold to private clients, she also heavily targeted museums. As a result, she would often go and meet with the weavers at their homes, take pictures, and document the name of the weaver, a fairly novel idea at the time when most buyers had no interest in the individual behind the basket they were buying. Not all weavers sold through a white dealer, though. During the 1920s, Lucy Taez, a Mono Lake Paiute in Yosemite, Miwok, who learned basket weaving as a child, was regarded as the best basket weaver in the Yosemite Valley and sold her colorful baskets to Yosemite visitors. Next time you head to a museum and see baskets on exhibit, I hope you'll think about the women behind the baskets, many of whose names were never recorded because the dealer or buyer didn't deem it relevant. These women, whose land had been taken from them and way of life disrupted, were able to commodify a utilitarian skill to support their families as they adapted to America's capitalist society. These baskets are more than beautiful craftsmanship, they are also a tangible example of cultural resilience. Mundane objects can contain big stories, and these baskets had a lot to say. What other stories might they tell?